Zoom first. So welcome everyone to another edition of WCM Fireside Chats. We've got a number of people on today. We're going to be talking about the Canada-U.S. border closure, some of the impact that's having on RV parks and campgrounds on both sides of the border, and just touching a little bit too on some of the impact that it's having or could have on the snowbird parks in the southern tier markets. Obviously, there's quite a few Canadian snowbirds that travel down. So we got three guests with us today. I guess we'll go around and just kind of introduce them, starting with Valerie. I guess, Valerie, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Valerie Austin. I purchased Hyclass Ocean Campground in Nova Scotia, Canada last June.
Yeah. And then Amir?
I'm Amir
Harpaz. How do you know she was done, Ben?
Oh, I thought she was done.
I was done.
Okay, all right.
All right, go ahead, Amir. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So my name is Amir Harpaz. I own a couple of parks in the Southeast in Florida and Georgia. I'm also a board member on the Florida and Alabama Association of RV Parks and Campgrounds.
Yep, okay. And then Mandi?
Morning, my name's Mandi. I manage Old Orchard Beach Campground in Maine. So we have 320 sites and nice seasonal park.
Okay.
Awesome. Welcome, Mandi.
And then Kara Brudegem from the Canadian RV Council, Camping and RV Council. Brian Searles joining us from Insider Perks, marketing firm that specializes in the outdoor industry. And I'm Ben Quiggle from Woodall's Campground Management Magazine. So, I mean, I guess I was just thinking about this all weekend. I was pretty excited to talk to everyone because we got such a wide, I think this is the first Canadian park owner we've had on the show, right, Brian? Or
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
We had a couple, yeah.
So,
I don't know why. We need more. I don't know.
We're all busy. We've had lots of association staff and stuff like that, but yeah, happy to have a park owner on now. Great.
So I guess, Valerie, I just kind of wanted to start with you then. Just kind of give us a picture. I know when we messaged each other on Facebook, you had mentioned that the Canadian border closure is impacting your park. I guess give us a picture of how it's kind of impacting your park.
So, so my park is located just 10 minutes away from the Kansas Causeway, which is basically the only way to get to Cape Breton Island. And Cape Breton is world renowned. We had, last year, we had so many Americans and people even from other places in the world come to visit us. It was astronomical. We mostly had people from the States or the rest of the world, more so than people from the rest of Canada. So definitely the border closure for us is a really big deal. Nova Scotians have really started coming now to our campground on the weekends, but last year through the week, we could be busier on a Wednesday than we were on a Friday and Saturday, just from tourists just coming in off the road, like not even reservations, just coming in. And this year through the week, it's like a ghost town. I almost have tumbleweeds going down my driveway.
Okay. I'm not very, I know a little bit about Canadian geography, but kind of give us a picture of where Nova Scotia is.
Really bad?
Okay, so Nova Scotia is the easternmost point in Canada on the actual land. Newfoundland is further east, and we're kind of above Maine.
Okay.
If you could picture that.
So the people who would come and see you midweek last year, were those Canadians or were those people from Maine coming up or from South coming up?
They were people from all over the states.
Okay.
Yeah. We had people from California, Texas, Florida, Mississippi, you name it. We had them all.
Did you track demographics last year, Valerie?
We did, yes. I don't have those numbers available to me, but we had a lot of Americans and a lot of Europeans. Those were our biggest markets. Yeah.
That certainly was my similar experience when I owned a park in Alberta. between the American and the European guests, that was making up more like 50% of my occupancy, but it certainly was a significant number. I can't imagine how that park, my old park specifically, is operating the same without that traffic.
Right, yeah. It's very difficult. Since we just purchased the park last year, we have a huge list of items that we need to do to bring the park up to our standards. And all of that is on hold. We had started renovating one of our cabins in January before all this hit, and it sits where we stopped in March, and we haven't gotten back to it yet. So, you know, it's definitely had a huge impact. We're way down so far this year, and August was a pretty big month for us last year, and I'm not looking forward to seeing the figures at the end of the month, that's for sure.
Yeah. Mandi, I guess, can you give us, you're on the other side of the border, I guess, can you give us just a perspective on how much Canadian business do you normally see at your park there in Maine, I guess?
We typically see a lot. I know early on we canceled, about 460 nights from Canadian guests, and then obviously hadn't booked any more. So I don't know, I think overall it's probably 50% Canadian for us based on like the second week of July to like the second or third week of August. So I know our numbers are way down. Occupancy is really down. So not having Canada be able to come is pretty rough.
Do you guys, now, are you seeing a lot of, what type of campers are you attracting this year? Are you seeing a lot of local campers or?
Yeah, we do have, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut that can come. New York can come now without restrictions. It still hurts because Massachusetts can't. So our numbers, again, still are down based on not having Massachusetts and Canada.
So what, you mentioned the restrictions, I guess. What are those restrictions in Maine like?
So if you're not coming from an approved state, you have to either have a negative COVID test 72 hours before arrival, or have already been quarantined in Maine or willing to quarantine, which is definitely a hard thing to get people to commit to. So if you're not really from an approved state, it's more difficult.
Well, Maine's a beautiful location. So, I mean, if I had to quarantine anywhere, Maine would be a nice location. You got the ocean and lobster. So that's great.
True.
As long as you can get out before it gets really cold.
Yeah.
Typically, it's nice though, right through October. We're finding October is one of the busiest months. So hopefully some travel will still happen then this year.
Well, you guys got those beautiful fall colors, right? The trees and everything? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Do you not have those in Indiana, Ben?
We do down south a little bit more. Michigan does. Michigan has beautiful colors. So, but I guess, Amir, you're kind of a little bit different. You own some parks that are a little bit southern, but you own a bunch of different parks. I guess, how has it impacted your parks? The border.
So my part of Florida, South Florida, really the season here is, starts in November, but the really strong months are, January, February, and March. So right now, as we went through the pandemic, South Florida is out of season, so it doesn't really affect us at all right now. Our northern parks in the state, talking from Florida Association point of view, are doing really strong, actually. They're doing year on year better than they did last year. I guess a lot of people are experiencing cabin fever, and as everybody knows, RVs are in such high demand, both rentals and new purchases. So our northern parks have been doing really, really well and strong. If I look at how the specific closure is affecting reservations coming into this winter season, I would say that, it's a concern. Parks are concerned. I know we are concerned. However, we're seeing that even though Canadian reservations are down, for the most part, right now at least, they're being replaced by a lot of other campers from the Midwest that are either coming for the first time because they bought a camper, or people that have previously did not consider South Florida, but for the most part, the reservations going into the winter are very strong. We've had some cancellations from Canadians, but including some Americans that are concerned if they're in the risk group. But for the most part, we're cautiously optimistic. And unless anything drastically happens, I would want to say with a high degree of confidence that we'll have a good season in South Florida.
Good.
Now you mentioned at the beginning of the show, and I don't know if Brian was on, he might have been doing his audio. You mentioned you owned a park in Alaska too. How's that Alaska park doing with the border closure, I guess?
That is with my partners are telling me that it's doing pretty good. Obviously it's a hybrid. It's a hotel and a campground. So
Okay.
the hotel side is doing okay, but the campground, the 115 sites that are there are doing good. A lot of people from the United States are crossing, into Alaska, and it's a very short season there. It's May through September.
Yeah. I know a lot of Canadian parks. Valerie, I don't know if your park is like this, but I know a lot of Canadian parks have really short seasons. What's your prime season, Valerie?
So we're open from May till October, but our money-making months are definitely July and August. That's where we make probably 90% of our money.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I guess, Brian, did you have any questions? You've been pretty silent down there. It's not like you to be this quiet.
I mean, you sounded like you came prepared with a whole list. I was just letting you work your way through them, Ben. Are you out now? I have to pick up the slack for the rest?
Well, I guess, Amir, you touched on it a little bit about the traveling snowbirds. I know we wanted to talk a little bit about the snowbird traffic. You mentioned that you were a little bit concerned about Canadian snowbird traffic. I guess, do you guys have plans in place for like if the Canadians aren't able to come south this winter?
So, I'll start by saying that, where I'm at, Lee County, Florida, has actually more RV sites than anywhere else in the state and possibly the United States. So, the demand for RV sites in Southwest Florida is incredibly, incredibly high. And all of South Florida. Typically, people are left out and do not even have a place to park an RV. So the demand is so much higher than the supply of RV sites in South Florida that I'd like to say, even though I'm concerned, and we're actively marketing to Midwesterners, if we're doing targeted advertising with pay-per-click or Facebook ads, I want to say that the RV industry is so strongly in the spotlight that there's nothing specific. I'd be lying if I say, "Oh, I'm scratching my head. What am I doing to attract people to my parks?" For the most part, reservations are steady. My park in Fort Myers is full between January and March. I do not have a single site available. We have a cancellation here and there, but it gets replaced immediately. So I do not see any specific action being taken. As an association, though, speaking with the association hat, we do actively promote the state and the campgrounds on social media. You've seen, Ben, some of the videos we've been doing and attracting the consumers. We've been working as an association with Jeff Kreider, the PR guy that works in our industry, and I've had extraordinary success with him, promoting our parks to consumers and bringing awareness. Bobby Cornwell, the president of the Florida and Alabama Association, is daily engaged in activities to promote the state. So I feel, as a park owner and as a board member on the association, fairly strong for this coming season.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, the schools are starting to come back into session, whether they're virtual or not. Are you a little concerned about a dip in traffic if, kids and families get tied down with school or aren't traveling as much?
Actually, the fact that I can tell you, we had this discussion, amongst myself and some of my fellow park owners in Florida, the ones that are having their summer season in the Panhandle part of Florida. The fact that some of the schools have been pushed back has helped them because, no school means more beach vacations and water vacations. So their traffic is actually, their occupancy has been extended further than it normally does.
Yeah, I've been talking about that for a few weeks with different clients and stuff like that. Is if school's virtual, it gives more opportunity for vacation longer into the season, which gives people an opportunity all over, I think, to make up some money that they might have lost earlier.
Correct. That's what I've been hearing from my fellow park owners.
Yeah, and I think we're going to tackle some of that next week because I think we're going to be doing something on, parks and homeschooler, road, people schooling virtually and stuff. So that'll be interesting.
I'd also like to add, Ben, sorry to cut you, even throughout, the pandemic, what I have experienced for the first time in 20 years in this industry is that people that live locally in high rises, they went and bought an RV and they said, I don't feel comfortable being in an elevator or a building lobby. And they went and bought an RV and came and camped with me. So I have people actually living in Fort Myers, left their condo and moved into an RV on my park.
Yeah, I was reading more stories about that at the beginning of this whole thing about, people trying to get out of the bigger cities and looking to the campgrounds or outdoor areas as a kind of, or maybe, as much exposure to the virus, I guess.
Right.
Ben, you're talking all about Florida, Ben. We're supposed to be talking about the border.
I know. I was.
Well, I was going to ask, so there's potential for the Canadian border closure to extend, and I'm just thinking about, I mean, specifically maybe more to Valerie and Mandi, who are so close to the border, how that will impact you. Obviously, I mean, once we transition into the fall, your parks, I imagine, will begin to close, but what that looks like for you and how you plan to make plans over the winter to start advertising and things for next season. Ooh, I think we've lost audio again.
Oh, Mandi, I guess. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So we're open till November 1st.
What are you doing?
We don't typically see a lot of Canadian travelers through the fall, but I mean, if the border opened, I would hope maybe people want to get away for a little bit, which would be nice. And we usually go and participate in the RV shows in Montreal and Quebec. So we'll see if that's something that happens this year for us, but we'd like to continue to advertise, and once the border opens, hopefully they'll come.
And you reopen in May, you said?
Yeah, so our season's May 1st to November 1st.
Okay. So what do you, are you planning, I know a lot of people are talking about the border closure going through 2020, but it can theoretically expand beyond that, I guess. Do you guys plan for next year? Or do you guys have any plans for next year as far as incoming reservations and stuff like that?
We've been making reservations for people who have stayed this year. They're just penciling in for next year. So we're hopeful.
Okay, yeah.
Did you mean as far as pivoting, Ben, like changing strategies, or?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. I didn't know.
I think it's probably a little too early to do that. At least if I was the marketing guy consulting on, right? Like I think there's an opportunity, like Amir said, to pivot to people who are now virtually homeschooling their kids virtually, to get them to come and things like that. And yes, the border closure might be extended, but I don't know as if you pivot already to next year in changing that strategy, because that's a long way away, right? Things are changing so fast.
Yeah.
So I figured out my audio problem. Definitely I think that the border closure will extend way past the end of my season this year and probably even into next year. So we've already been discussing that we're going to be targeting our Facebook ads to other provinces. We've mainly been targeting this summer to our province, but we're hoping that, because right now we're not even open to the rest of Canada, we're just in an Atlantic Canada bubble. which means Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and PEI. That's the only people who can come here without quarantining right now. So I'm hoping soon we're going to open up to the rest of Canada, and I think that would be good news for me. But I really can't envision even next year having the border open much unless a lot changes between now and then.
Have you considered smuggling people from Europe?
No, I'm definitely not a professional smuggler, although maybe that's what I'll do over the winter.
We're all evolving, right? We all have to adapt with the times, so.
Smuggling.
Right, maybe that'll be my winter project, is to learn how to smuggle people across the border.
Well, no, you don't want the United States people. We have too much virus down here, but you could probably smuggle people in from Ireland and stuff like that. That's not too bad of a boat trip.
That would be awesome.
I can't imagine the lineup to be smuggled into Canada is that huge right now.
I mean, maybe it's beautiful during the summer. You just plan the whole winter. I mean, you got to think outside the box, Kara. I'm just saying.
Well, my point more is that a lot of people are really trepidatious about traveling at all, and certainly going that far. I mean, I know there's flights available. I can go get on a plane and go to Vegas tomorrow still.
Sure. Yeah.
But do I want to? I mean, I think that's going to be a huge factor in a lot of the, we have 100,000 Canadian snowbirds, and there's a good portion of them who are going to choose to stay home this winter.
Well, that's ultimately the question, right? I mean, you can open the borders and you can open everything up for travel and then flights and all that kind of stuff, but are people willing to actually do it is a whole nother question.
Right. And I think that's going to be on a spectrum. I think you're going to have the folks who insist on staying home and maybe are compromised, and then as long as there's flights or border access available, there will be those who will go, and they arrange in between. But it'll be interesting.
Right.
I think what Florida did very successfully and effectively, as an association, is that we've really promoted from the beginning that, this industry and certainly parks in our state, that social distancing is in our DNA, and it's almost the perfect way to travel and vacation. And, that's true for the entire industry, not just Florida. That's the message that we've tried to communicate. And obviously the RV Manufacturer Association has been doing the same. So Ben, based on what you said, about the school being extended and additional opportunities are people who traditionally fly abroad, and now they are sort of stuck in the United States, and RV becomes a very viable option.
Yeah, I think the whole industry is obviously uniquely positioned. That we're seeing it in all over the media all the time. People are making those choices to transition. We certainly have access to a new, portion of the market that maybe we never did before. Pardon me, but yeah, I think as long as things kind of continue like this through 2021, we'll see that continue, as long as there's still RVs to be bought or rented.
I mean, that's the hard thing right now, buying an RV. I mean, they're all sold out or going for top dollar right now.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how manufacturers and things kind of respond to that over the next 12 months or so. And what the market will bear. But
I guess, Kara, on your end, I know I've been hearing a lot about travel insurance, and if you are a Canadian snowbird and you want to travel, there's a lot of question marks about whether you're going to be covered or not. Is there an update on that? What have you heard on that end?
Pardon me, I personally know a couple of snowbirds who are waiting on information from their insurance companies about policies. And I think insurance companies specifically are kind of treading water about this until they hear, further announcements about the border. If the border remains closed, I think insurance companies are going to easily be able to kind of pass the buck and say, we're not going to insure you to go to the States right now since the border's closed. But if things reopen, I do see insurance companies strategically kind of I don't know if capitalizing is the word, but I do think they will offer policies. There's probably going to be rate increases. I was doing some reading. The Canadian Snowbirds Association has a partnership with an insurance company that's promising to maintain policy pricing and things like that to their members. So hopefully that's kind of an industry expectation at this point, but frankly, I think nobody's making any big moves until we get a firm announcement about how long the border's closed.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's all very fascinating. There's so many different moving parts, so to this whole thing. So I guess Valerie, you mentioned that. So in Canada, you guys can move around from province to province. Then, so you're getting a lot of
No,
Some provinces.
no. Currently, it's restricted just to 4 provinces in my area. I'm not even sure about the rest of Canada, to tell you the truth.
There are the majority of the remaining provinces, well, all of them really, there seems to be interprovincial travel. And I mean, you do see kind of essential travel only expectations, but I can't even imagine how they would go about kind of policing that kind of expectation. But you know, where I'm located here in Alberta, campgrounds are hosting out of province guests, and kind of happy to take them, specifically since the government parks, the provincial and federal parks, have been restricting to their own province's residents. So in an Alberta provincial park, you must be an Alberta resident to make a reservation there. Same goes for BC, same goes for Saskatchewan. So the private campgrounds are kind of in a unique position where they can host those out of province guests. That
Right, but
access.
right. I found this summer, even though we are open now to other Atlantic provinces, still, I would say 98% of our visitors have been from Nova Scotia. We've had very few from the other 3 provinces, so Newfoundland, New Brunswick, and PEI. The majority is just Nova Scotians, and even that, it's been a lot of local people. So we're kind of hoping in a way that it's a blessing in disguise for us, because we've had a lot of people that came here for the first time this year. They didn't know we existed. They can see that we obviously had started a bunch of improvements around the park since we purchased it. So we're hoping now we will have a bigger local base. Fingers crossed.
Well, that's what we're trying to talk to our clients about too, is there's always going to be an audience of people who want to camp for the reasons that Amir mentioned, because it's social distancing, it's the best place to go on vacation and be as safe as possible. But there's always going to be a demand for the outdoors. And so it's just acknowledging that, well, maybe things are changing in certain areas of the country. Maybe I just have to retarget my marketing, like you were saying with your Facebook ads, and just embracing what the new normal is. If that's just a temporary normal, who knows? But for now, we're going to attract who we can attract.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mandi, are you seeing that too, Mandi? I guess, are you seeing a lot of people that are from the local area that maybe haven't tried the park before but are coming out, I guess?
We have seen that. We have some guests locally too that now want to be seasonal, so that's been a good thing for us.
Do you guys have a lot of seasonals at your park?
We have about 130.
130? Okay. And are some of those seasonals Canadians, or are they mainly in the US?
A few of them are Canadian.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. So is there a potential that you guys could expand your seasonal sites if you get a lot of interest from people?
We have talked about adding some more. So we have availability to do it. It's just taking away some of the overnight camping. Okay.
So, I mean, it's great to hear, when you have new people come into the park and they love it so much that they want to be seasonals. That's probably really good to hear.
Yeah, it's been great to hear for us.
So, are you guys a family destination? Like, is there like a lot of family stuff to do around, or what kind of, campers do you attract?
We do attract a lot of families, especially in the summer season. We're near amusement parks and the beach, and there's definitely a lot to do. And then the spring and fall are more older couples traveling through, or just the looking at foliage and stuff.
Okay. All right.
I think we wanted to get Amir more involved, but he basically came on and said everything's fantastic in Florida, and so we have nothing to discuss now. So
Well, I was wanting to kind of bring up an interesting issue that we might see up here in Canada if the border remains closed and we don't have, suddenly all of these snowbirds that normally head south kind of can't, or maybe choose not to. We're going to have some occupancy issues. We have lots of campgrounds up here who don't have the infrastructure to host RVs past October. And there's concern among a lot of our members that there's going to be no place for a lot of these folks to go. So, we have a broad set of expectations across the board. Some of our members are happy that the border is closed, and others are really crossing their fingers for reopening so that we can kind of transition back to a bit more normal. But it's sounding like with what Amir's saying, that maybe there's not a ton of sites available in Florida if the border does open for all of our snowbirds to go to.
No, I want to reiterate, there's obviously a concern, and it's not just, obviously we'd like to see the Canadian border opens. A lot of parks rely on Canadian campers in Florida. A lot of Canadian campers have annual sites that they pay annually for in Florida, and they cannot, even though they go back to Canada, they keep paying for a site, and they have, whether it's a park model or they even leave their RV here in Florida, and they cannot come back and enjoy that their camper. So there's certainly a concern, and we'd like to see the border open. But I think on the bigger picture is the concern for Florida is there going to be a major second wave throughout the country that's going to deter not just Canadians, but the Midwesterners from coming down. So that's why I said earlier, as a state, we're cautiously optimistic. Our reservations are strong. Sure, we have some cancellations from both Canadians and people in the Midwest that are obviously afraid and don't want to expose themselves to the risk, and everybody gets it. But for the most part, I think people here are optimistic that we'll have a good season. Certainly the parks in northern Florida that their season is about to end. It's actually not about to end. August is their high season.
a lot closer than you are, yeah. So
right, they are having phenomenal years. I talked to Campgrounds, and they're telling me their year over year, their occupancy is up 20%, 17% from last year. So it's incredible.
I guess, and I think, Kara, on our end too, I think we have a lot of northern snowbirds that maybe are facing the same issue here in the U.S. I mean, a lot of these like parks, like in Michigan or even up in Maine, I mean, I think quite a few of them are exploring maybe extending a little bit out into the fall more than maybe they would have. But, at some point they're going to have to close. And I mean, they don't have the infrastructure either, a lot of them, for winter camping. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, whether the snowbirds find somewhere to live, if they live in their RV full time, whether they find somewhere to hunker down, or whether they do head south. So, I mean, there's a lot of question marks that still have yet to be answered. I think we'll know more in the next couple of months, I would imagine. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just changing so fast that nobody knows right now.
Yeah, which is kind of the theme of the whole pandemic, is nobody knows.
nobody knows anything. So, and some parts of it has surprised me, and other parts with some of the traveling that's going on, it's kind of surprised me a little bit. I thought maybe traveling would be a little bit less than it is now. But, I have friends who have gone on. I mean, I have a friend that just went to the Grand Canyon. I can't imagine going to the Grand Canyon this year, but they did.
Why? It's big and vast and spread out, and you can social distance pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just planning wise, all the states have different restrictions, and just trying to find a location to rest my head at night. They're all booked now, so I can't go now. They're all booked.
Of course you can. You can go camp in like a dirt patch at the bottom of the canyon. It's BLM.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say. There's no occupancy, at least in my part of the world, in the western provinces here. There's no sites to be had. You can't. There's some first come first serve provincial and federal parks that people are used to first come first showing up there, but they're requiring reservations for those spaces now. It's the need to get out and satisfy that kind of travel desire is obviously really, really, really motivating for people. They're willing to risk exposure to this virus just to get out and do anything almost. So,
right.
It's certainly good for our industry. I think it's going to be telling over the next few months how things transition as the weather changes, certainly in my part of the world.
So
Yeah.
Amir, I just want to ask you a quick question. Sorry,
Sure.
Ben, did you have a follow-up or?
No.
Okay. So Amir, you mentioned, let's just say worst case scenario just for a second, that the Canadian border remains closed through the end of 2020. And let's just even say worst case scenario that you have, you arguably are not out of your first wave in Florida yet, but let's say we have a second wave that causes people to be more cautious about visiting Florida. Is there an opportunity for your parks to pivot and attract more locals like Valerie's doing?
Some parks certainly do. A lot of the Florida parks, you may well know, from having clients here, are more geared and built as seasonal parks or 55 plus, where you cannot even bring in families. So that's going to be a challenge for sure. Hopefully we don't have to get there. But I think if that is the case, we'll have parks that are doing better than others. And those who are, built as 55 plus parks for, active adults, or the more long-term park, the annual parks, those are less of a concern. But some parks will find very challenging if traffic to Florida stops. No question about it.
But I think there are opportunities probably to pivot though, right? And especially we were talking about school, for example, right? Let's say, it's not.
Yeah, for sure. And my park, for the first time ever, I have people living in my city who are now living in my park. They have a condo in my city, yet they don't want to be in their condo. They're in my park.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I've never seen it. People have a condo here, went and bought an RV, say, I don't want to live in a condo. I'm moving into an RV.
Well, so when we were talking about the virtual schools though, and you having that extra opportunity at your park and some other parks in Florida too, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that the whole season of school is virtual, at least in some areas of the country. Is it
Yes.
likely? No, but it could happen. And so maybe you can get some of those families to stay a couple months at your park if they know they're going to virtual school through February or March.
Yeah, for the most part, as I said, Florida, I think is well positioned. The demand for the state during the winter. Where do you go in the States during the winter? The majority.
Right, yeah. I don't think you're going to have a problem either way. So,
but it's like you go Alabama, Texas, a little bit of southern Georgia, and that's it. In the southeast, the rest is cold. Once you climb up to North Carolina, Tennessee, it gets cold up there. So for the most part, I think we're good. But yeah, there are going to be challenges for some parks for sure. But those are hard to say.
Mandi, on your end, I guess, or Valerie too, on both your end, I guess, are you looking at potentially trying to stay open a little bit longer this winter, just to kind of recoup maybe some of the losses throughout the year?
I really don't think that we'd be able to. We just don't have the infrastructure for it. It gets cold here. It can be nice one day, and then the next day everything is freezing and it stays freezing, and we got to get our water shut down before that.
That would be our case too. We already closed November 1st, and sometimes that's a little bit scary.
Are you, Are you looking, Mandy, are you looking, and Valerie too, I guess, are you looking at being able to attract some of these virtual school? You know, we've talked with Amir a little bit about the virtual school. Are you looking at being able to maybe market or attract to some of these virtual school families or whatever, you know, come stay at the park for a few weeks?
Well, we haven't been, because a lot of the parents are back to work now. So, you know, we'd really just mostly get people on the weekends now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that is, you know, the parents do have to work. I know there's quite a few parents that are working from home still, so there's a potential to nab some of those people who are still working from home and have kids that are doing virtual school, I guess. Mandy, what, you know, are you doing anything to maybe attract some of the virtual school people?
We haven't done anything specific yet for that. I do know we have people that have like made extensions to their reservations based on being able to work from home. So that's been good.
Yeah.
Ben, I do want to expand on Brian's point. Actually, you know, if the RVs that are flying off the lots here in Florida, you know, you see massive dealerships with empty lots. Right next to me, there's a dealership that's 400 acres. That's down to 20% inventory. You know, we do expect that a lot of Floridians will, Brian, you know, will start camping closer to home. We'll go to, let's go a weekend here, a weekend there, and use their home as a base and camp out.
Okay.
So they have some sort of vacationing.
That makes sense. Yeah. And then you could, as the association, as a board member, you could kind of spread that love around, so to speak, right? And maybe even plan out routes for them to go.
That's what we're trying to do, actually. If you guys, you know, go on our, you know, Instagram account, you'll see videos where we go around the state, interview campers of all ages, ask them what they like, why they chose this campground over another. Ben, I know you've seen it. We really try to expose our campgrounds to the consumers.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, now more than ever, I think you've got to really market locally. I don't know, Brian, what you're encouraging, what are you encouraging your clients, I guess, as far as that? Are you encouraging them to market a lot locally?
I think it's so vastly different depending on state to state, city to city, country to country, right? So I think it's very specific use case. I'd probably struggle to answer that as a blanket statement.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it's just a weird time. I think if we were to look at the beginning of the year to where we're at now, it's, you know, light and day. I mean, it's just completely crazy what the year's turned into. I don't know if you feel that way, but.
I mean, I think to answer your question a little bit better, Ben, like you and I have talked about this before, you know, off Zoom. It's more of a, I want my clients to be prepared for whatever eventuality might come. And so that's why we were talking to Amir about, well, what if the border closes and stays closed? Or what if people get scared to come to Florida? Like, I don't want to be the doom and gloom, but I want people to have a plan in their mind for, well, if this happens, because things are changing so fast and we have no idea where it's going, I'm going to do this. Or if this happens, I'm going to do that. So just have that plan in place, I think, is our goal for most of our clients, to be able to pivot and have that ready to go if something happens.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess, Mandy, when you're looking to the future, I guess, you know, as you're looking to the rest of the fall, are you looking still for some pretty strong traffic throughout the November 1st, I guess?
We're hoping, I was looking at charts the other day and there's definitely reservations there. I do feel like for fall, people still, you know, take their time in planning that. So hopefully that will still be the case. And then after Columbus Day, we're really the only ones open. So we do get quite a few guests from that if people are still traveling.
Did you guys, now, when was the key season for Canadians, I guess? When would the most Canadians come across? Do they come in the fall? Do they come all year? Do they come just during the summer?
For us, mostly the summer. So like the second, third week of July until the second or third week of August. That's really when we see the most travel for that.
Okay.
That's when our kids are off school.
Okay. So you're kind of like in your peak Canadian, would be your peak Canadian season right now then, right, Mandy?
Right.
Okay.
All right. There's lots of vacancy right now.
Okay.
So now Let me just ask a question, and it may be just an ignorance thing that I don't know, but from the Canadian and Mandi and Valerie, both your parks, since you're up so far north, you were talking about not being able to stay open past a certain point. Is that mostly a water, like lines not being buried enough, like an infrastructure thing, or is it that might be beyond the desire to want to take a vacation? I mean, but
No, it's definitely a infrastructure thing. You know, we could probably stay open a few more weeks just offering people power, but most people want water too. So,
is it feasible? Like, again, Kara was saying, like, this isn't ideal what I'm proposing, right? But like Kara was saying, there's a question of where some of these people are going to go. Is it feasible to do dry camping in some parks?
I know in my experience, in my old park, there was limitations on how long you can stay in the dry camping site. The county I operated in required water and sewer as a necessity of life over 14 days.
Okay. Do you think there's, in an emergency, an opportunity for some of that legislation to change? Like if they could figure out the logistics of moving, swapping out water? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but obviously there's going to be a point where if the border remains closed, that there's an issue that needs solved, right?
There are parks that do it, that are able to maybe truck in water and sump out dump station and things like that into the colder months. But yeah, there's concerns about health and safety
Sure.
regulations and requirements and things like that. That, I mean, I think a lot of parks don't necessarily even have the staff capacity to be able to take something like that on, especially on short notice. But I do think in certain places in the country, it's probably doable.
Mandi, I guess what's that look like? As people want to camp past a certain point, or you mentioned the infrastructure. Is there a way to do infrastructure to maybe stay open a little bit longer?
I'm not really sure. I mean, I think it's maybe possible, but for us, it's also a matter of licensing too, because we can be open for 6 months. So we have some hoops probably to jump through to change that first.
I guess, Mandi, just, what's impacted you more, the restrictions that Maine has had on camp, on travel, or the fact that the Canadians can't cross the border? I guess, what's impacted you the most?
I think both have been really hard for us. Yeah, I mean, the Canadian travel, not being able to have that has been a huge hit, but I think also the restrictions for Maine, not being able to have Massachusetts come freely, that's been a big deal for us.
Okay, yeah. Shane just messaged me, Shane Devenish from the executive director of the Canadian RV and Camping Council, just messaged me and said, there's certain dates, you have like timelines that you can be open. I know in Canada quite a bit.
I feel like if you wanted to unmute Shane, he could probably explain that way better than you just did, Quickle.
I always explain things the best you're going to get. So
I know in my parks experience, that was part of why we had to close, was our operating permit only permitted so many operating days per year. And we also had limitations on our infrastructure that, made the municipality decide it wasn't in the public's best interest to try to limp a plan together in terms of water and sewer and those kinds of things. And so those things were mandated to me for my business by my local government in my operating permit. And I think broadly across Canada, that's probably the case pretty much anywhere. There's a few spots where, the climate is temperate enough to limp it together. And there are parks now that are, in development that are purposefully putting in really deep services so that they can access, a longer season, spread their operating days out quite a bit further. Obviously those types of developments are quite a bit more expensive, but we are starting to see that happen specifically here in Alberta. There's a couple of new parks that have done that. But for the most part, we are regulated to only operate during certain times of the year.
So is the government preparing for, what if these snowbirds stay back? And well, obviously a lot of them are probably going to stay back if the border doesn't open. And what's the government doing to kind of prepare for that?
I think you got your answer with just a laugh right there.
I don't think a ton at this point. Again, I think it's another scenario where everybody's kind of waiting to see what the border announcements are going to be. But there is certainly concern among members, specifically in Ontario and in other parts of the country, that local governments who maybe don't understand the limitations on campgrounds are going to say, you need to keep all of these guests here because they have nowhere else to go. And they don't have the physical ability to do so. I think, I know our association is already working with those members to communicate with governments kind of at all levels to get support there. I know Shane kind of mentioned potentially talking with the hotel association about maybe filling some rooms if we get to a point where we have border closure extensions and nowhere for a lot of snowbirds to go. But I think all of those kind of strategies are still being negotiated. I'm sure Shane could, if he wants to jump on, he could.
Yeah.
Well, and two, when we're done with Shane, Ben, why don't you bring on Bobby too, because he's on here listening on Zoom, just because I think, Amir, you're on the board and you're giving us a great perspective of Florida, but I think Bobby probably talks to, would you argue that point, that Bobby probably talks to more people than you do? And so maybe Bobby can give us a different picture of different areas of the states and how they're dealing with Canada too, just to get his input on here.
Maybe, yeah. Shane, are you there?
I am. Great conversation this morning.
Yeah, so I guess Kara, just ask your question again, Kara. I guess Kara wanted you to explain a little bit more about maybe what the government's doing to kind of, hopefully, I lost my train of thought. This is what happens when you get old, so I just lose mid-sentence. So, but yeah,
you've worked really closely with a lot of the parks out there that are preparing for this potential issue. So just if you have anything to add or more details for us.
Yeah. So we've what we're doing, we've developed a letter that we're going to send to different governments, basically saying that campgrounds are incapable of extending the season because of what you guys were saying, the infrastructure and whatnot. So we're trying to be a little proactive so that the government doesn't come back to us and says to us that you need to house these people, similarly to what they told us at the beginning of all this, saying you guys have to open early. So we don't want that situation at the end of this. So we've reached out to the Canadian Snowbird Association. We've reached out to the Hotel Association of Canada to work with us and our campgrounds and their campers to offer some kind of a solution. We fully expect there'll be a problem. I was on a call last week when they had the border folks there, and although they don't know and aren't given any heads up, they kind of believe that this will be closed until the end of the year. So, we definitely foresee that there's going to be a problem. And, where do we keep those thousands of snowbirds that have RVs that normally take them across the border back to Amir's place or, all these other places down south? We're trying to do our best to help out.
I think we just got to think outside the box, Shane. So I think if we just give Florida to Canada and then create some kind of dedicated train line down to move RVs, we'd be fine.
I would love that. I love Florida.
I'm gonna say, I don't know if Florida wants that plan, but
well, we all have to compromise a little bit here.
Well, I do think there's going to be some major hurdles, like Shane mentioned. If like we're anticipating the border closes at least to the end of the year, especially as we start transitioning now into fall. We're only a few weeks really away of from the weather changing. And goodness knows that we could see snow and all kinds of things, you know, with all kinds of unexpected timelines. So I don't know. I mean, I'm hopeful that I'm sure we can all kind of find some sort of solution, but it's important that we're communicating, you know, the limitations on campgrounds from the infrastructure standpoint. It's not simply just about keeping the gate unlocked and keeping somebody at the front desk. There's a ton of logistical challenges and frankly, impossibilities related to staying open in the wintertime.
Would it be feasible for the government to fund like a massive like infrastructure thing if they had to in an emergency, Kara? Not that they would or be willing to, I'm not suggesting that, but would it be like if they just decided to give you the money, is it possible to do anything with it or no? Is it too short a notice?
I think number one, it's far too short notice. You know, doing any sort of development stuff like that needed to start when the ground
Spring, yeah.
But there's also, I mean, there's so many campgrounds, like I can't even wrap my brain around. I did an infrastructure project at my park and converted 30 tent sites to 50 amp power, water, and sewer sites. And without deep service, that cost me $250,000. It's not a small undertaking. I can't imagine how they would choose which parks would get access to this kind of funding, and certainly without, you know, raising hairs on the necks of those who maybe don't get it. It's a really big hurdle. I mean, I'd love to see them start investing in infrastructure in private parks. They're very committed to infrastructure investment, obviously in their public spaces. The federal and provincial parks certainly see lots of infrastructure investment, but private parks, I mean, despite, you know, maybe making our dreams come true, I don't see it happening.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, it just, is that something that maybe could be long-term? Like maybe not for this time, but maybe they'd look at it maybe down the road for future crises if they happen?
I think that's outside of my realm of
I guess,
willingness to comment on. If you're asking me personally, no, I don't see it happening in my own personal opinion. I've been surprised before by things, but like I said, they have such a stake in the game in terms of because of those provincial and federal parks, that's generally where those dollars are going to end up.
I added Bobby to the conversation since you were slacking off, Ben.
I do that a lot. Bobby, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
We can hear you, Bobby.
Right.
So I know you and Amir have been doing a lot of work where you guys are talking to a lot of campgrounds. I know I see Amir's videos all the time. He travels a lot,
Right.
and so that's really neat. I guess, you know, what are you getting the sense from, you know, the members as far as what this, you know, snowbird season is going to look like?
Right. It's Amir's covered it well, but yes, there is some a little bit of confusion, a little bit of just uncertainty, and of course, some people are scared. Many of our parks, especially as Amir mentioned in the South region, anywhere from Orlando south, tends to get a lot of snowbirds during the winter. Starting in November, as early as November, they start coming down. So, and obviously, it looks like the borders are going to be closed for the rest of this year. So, yeah, I'm not going to say parks aren't scared. Many of them are. Some are very optimistic. They have seen an upturn in business, a lot due to the new RVers that are out there and people staying in the state instead of traveling farther away. So some of that business loss is being taken care of by in-state travelers. And we hope that continues through the winter season. But it's a big concern. The Canadians are very important to our industry. And, you know, we hope everything pans out where they can get on down, because it's, like I said, January, February, March. That's huge for our industry in Florida, and as well as any other state in the South.
When's the point when you would know that there's going to be less traffic, I guess, like, is it October, November? I guess, when do these people start reserving? Obviously, I think a lot of them already have their sites reserved, I guess. It's just whether they show up.
Exactly. And earlier in the year, many of our parks reported that bookings looked fantastic. You know, we're talking about April and May. They were still receiving the bookings and they didn't think it's going to be a big concern, but you know, who would have thought this would have dragged on through August? So now it's real. So, you know, yeah, you're right. The reservations are there. I think most parks are seeing them come in, but the question is, will they be able to actually fulfill them? That's the difference in the unknown right now.
I'd like to add, Bobby and Ben and everybody else on the panel and listening, you know, I would say, and Bobby, you could probably assist me on that, that in the past 18 months, we've seen more brand new RV sites come out of the ground in Florida than I've seen in the past 10 years.
Oh, yeah. So you guys got a lot of RV sites. There's a lot of demand. It's just, you know, on the snowbird side, I guess it's just whether they're comfortable to travel, I guess, right?
Or can travel legally. Yeah, one or the other.
I mean, if they're Canadian. So I guess, Mandi, you mentioned having a lot of seasonals. Do you have a lot of seasonals that go down south for the winter, or?
We do have a good portion of them that do. A lot of people that do that have park models here. So they do the 6 and 6.
Okay. What are they, you know, do you talk to them? What are they saying about as far as their comfort limits with traveling? Are they still planning on going south?
Well, they would have to leave here anyway, so
Yeah.
assuming they're going back, but we've had some that just haven't made it this season based on not being comfortable traveling.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess they would have to leave, but I didn't know if they were from that area, maybe they'd stay or in that area or go down south or whatever. So okay.
I think it'll be interesting to see if there's going to be naturally a segment. We don't know how large or how small it will be, right? Of the population who, for whatever reason, doesn't want to go to, I mean, let's just assume for a second that Florida, Texas, Arizona, California remain our hotspots, right? There's going to be probably a small, but a segment of the population who's nervous about going there and who maybe is in Maine and who's in Michigan and who's in these northern states right now for the summer. So it'll be interesting to see if those states continue to be hotspots. They have to go somewhere, right? Because obviously the northern parks are closing, but do they settle in the same areas as they always have? That'll be interesting for me to at least see how that plays out.
It's going to be really difficult to track that kind of data.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it absolutely will be. But
yeah.
Kara,
Yeah, I'm interested too.
Kara, this is Bobby. I got a question. Are you receiving, or do you know of any kind of date? Has there been any date thrown around out there that they may be making a decision as on the Canadian government getting pressure either within or without to push this at all?
Well, so currently the border closure is only to the 21st of this month, technically. So they need to be making an announcement anytime now. I think, like I said earlier, there's, you know, a vast majority of the population is waiting with bated breath to make all kinds of choices past August 21st. There is surveys I'm seeing from Canadian, you know, standard portions of the population that do expect, because of what numbers look like in the States, that the border remain closed. And I do think that they are actively putting pressure on our government to extend the border closure. Obviously, there's those on the other side who would like to see things open up and get
right
to a little bit more normal, but the overwhelming majority of our, certainly maybe the surveys are skewed, but the survey respondents that I'm seeing specifically, you're talking like 80% are expecting the border closure to be extended. Because of how close we're getting now to that date of August 21st, I do anticipate something coming out anytime now. I'm nervous that the Liberal government will kind of toe the line and say, oh, we'll extend it another month. And then we'll all be sitting here again next month at this time.
In limbo, yeah. It'd be better to have an answer than no answer at all.
Exactly. And I think they're being pretty strategic politically about what that timing looks like right now. There's, obviously other sort of dramatic things happening up here politically that they'll want to maybe play that in a certain way.
Bobby, what's the unknown aspect of this do for your planning as an association, I guess? I mean, it's hard to plan for things in an unknown environment, I guess.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, we're all in the same boat with this. So, I mean, we're just kind of moving along as normal, but as Amir stated, we're, as far as our marketing and trying to help our members out, we're doing what we can to offset any change of business. As far as the way the association operates, and we've had to move our conference. We've canceled it for this year, obviously, like everyone else had to do. And just moving forward with May 2021 being, the big hopeful event, and just doing everything we can just to kind of be flexible, change with the times if needed. But overall, there hasn't been a whole lot of change. It's just, being here when somebody asks us about this or asks us about that or needs help with this and information on this. And right now, the Canadian border closure is the biggest issue that most parks are concerned with. I mean, there's not a whole lot we can do except to try to, like I said, be ready to pivot when necessary and kind of try to help bring states that are closer to our state or within our campers within our state stay here and actively, visit the campgrounds. So as far as the business operations goes, but, we're just wait and see. Fingers are crossed that this miraculously goes away soon.
I know.
Another good point. Sorry, Brian. Shane brings a good point in the chat box too. The possibility that the border opens only one way, Canada to US only. So our government is talking about that. So, potentially restricting US entry, but allowing Canadians to cross. So there's some options on the table that, like I said, I think politically they're going to be strategic about those kinds of choices. I can't imagine what the logistics would be of monitoring Canadians who cross and then return and those kinds of things. But I think, like Brian always says, thinking outside of the box is a necessity, and we might see a unique solution like that.
Yeah, that's honestly sounds like the best solution for everybody involved, to be perfectly honest. If you are a Canadian snowbird and you want to go south, then it protects Canada from the 80%, as you're saying in the survey, of who don't want the border open. And if they're going to stay down there 3 to 6 months in Florida, then, or wherever they're going, right, then when they come back, there's a mechanism in place to let them quarantine if we're still in the situation when they come back.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah.
All right, we just need to get Justin on the phone and tell him we solved this.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yep. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, Brian, do you have any other questions? I think I've answered all the questions I had.
Yeah, no, I think we had a really good discussion. And unless any of our people here have anything to add, comments, concerns, it's been really useful and knowledgeable, and a lot of things were shared, and I think we all learned some. Which is the goal.
Valerie, Mandi, thanks for coming on. I hope it was worthwhile for you guys. I know we loved hearing from you. And Amir, thanks for coming on. It's always great talking with you. And
thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Great to see you, Brian and Ben.
Yeah, and Bobby
Sarah and Valerie and Mandi.
Yeah, and Bobby and Shane, thanks for coming on just briefly just to talk to us. It was great hearing from you guys. And Kara, it's always nice hearing from you. Brian, it's okay. It was okay. So, but thanks everyone for joining, and we hope we answered all your questions. And we look forward to talking to you next week or whatever, the audience. Join us next week. So thank you so much.
Take care, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.